Hello, welcome to Rough Cut Film Review. This is a review of Star Trek Into Darkness. I am quite surprised at the number of people who've complained at the grammar of the title. It's the lack of the hyphen, I believe, but to be fair, you can't really Star Trek into something, so grammatically it doesn't make a great deal of sense, and actually having seen the film it doesn't really make much sense in the context of the film either. I think they just thought it sounded quite cool. But anyway, on we go. So this is directed by JJ Abrams, who directed the 2009 Star Trek film. He directed the excellent Super 8, the pilot of Lost apparently, according to IMDb, and he will be directing the new Star Wars film. I thought the 2009 Star Trek was perfectly fine for a reboot. Here in Into Darkness, the plot, we have a Starfleet officer who turns against his erstwhile employees and commits a terrorist attack on Starfleet in London and then flees to the Klingon homeworld. So we've got the threat of all-out war hanging above us with the Klingons and Starfleet, and Kirk is given the Enterprise once again and told to bring this traitor to justice and ideally avoid war with the Klingons. So he's on a revenge mission. So it stars Chris Pine, Zachary Quinto as Kirk and Spock respectively. We also have Simon Pegg, Peter Weller as an admiral. He was Robocop, by the way. Carl Urban and the excellent Benedict Cumberbatch as the baddie. The best bits for me in this film are the relationship between Kirk and Spock and the differences of their character, and the two actors do a pretty good job of that. And Cumberbatch makes an excellent baddie, chewing the scenery, really hamming it up. He's fantastic, but also a really good actor, and he's really angry and shouty, and it's really, really good. Also, when he's quiet and sinister, he's really quiet and sinister. Very good. We also have some pretty good stuff about the nature of Starfleet, what it actually means, whether it's adventurers going away and exploring, or whether it's, them becoming a military. And there's a bit of stuff in there really about the sort of the light Enterprise and the dark Enterprise. That's all pretty good. It's suitably exciting, it's bombastic, it is a blockbuster really. They've dumbed down a bit of the nerdy wordy Star Trek stuff you've seen. No one gets caught in an energy beam that looked like the same energy beam as last week. It's an enjoyable film that's not just going to appeal to the sci-fi crowd. It's accessible. Actually, having said it's not just going to appeal to the sci-fi crowd, I don't know what they'd make of this. I think it's probably too accessible, dumbed down a little bit, and I don't know whether they'd like it. I think about it. Anyway, if you're a Star Trek fan, please do let me know, because I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. So the negative side, well, the film is too long. It's far too long. There's a whole extra act we didn't need really. Also, they're trying to work within the shadow of William Shatner's huge ego from the 1960s. How can they make Kirk's character likeable and relatable? Actually, they come fairly close, but they don't quite manage it. He's still a little bit insufferable. He's far too overly confident for his abilities, but he just seems to magically get things done, which doesn't really make a great deal of sense. They do at least here admit that his staggering arrogance is a character flaw, not something to be celebrated, so that's fine. For me, Chris Pine does an okay job here. He's not one of my favourite actors in the world, but he's perfectly fine, does a decent job. Zachary Quinto, who plays Spock, I've always liked him. He shows a comedic touch here, which is, a light comedic touch. He's the straight guy, obviously, as Spock. And in previous things, like American Horror Story, for example, he is pretty much a raving psychopath. So it's nice for him to do something a little bit different here, and he's, as always, a very good actor. The characters that don't work for me are, I believe, legacy issues. So Bones and Scotty, for me, don't work because the actors spend far too much time doing impressions of their 1960s counterparts, trying to be, thinner, younger versions. And the chap who played Chekhov as well was in a similar boat now I think about it. They're concentrating too much on doing an impression of that guy and not actually playing their parts well. And for me, Scotty is probably the worst of the bunch. It's almost like he's taken from another film. The tone of all his stuff is completely out of sorts with the rest of it. I mean, it's called Into Darkness. There is some quite dark stuff here, although Abrams doesn't handle it in, for my mind, a correct way. It's uneven in terms of tone. It doesn't really tie in and make that much sense. But for me, the Scotty stuff is taken from another film. He's the comic relief. He's got this sort of little alien minion midget guy with him, which is fine. It looks fine. It looks like a midget in a suit. I don't mind that, but it doesn't fit. I don't see where it fits here, and it's not funny either. I didn't laugh at the comic interludes at all. This is something that Star Trek films have been largely guilty of for a very long time. Whenever they seem to have a plot hole in Star Wars, they use the Force. And in Star Trek, it seems to be time travel, and they've been guilty of that for a very long time now, as I said. Perhaps it's a nod to the old fans. There's Leonard Nimoy as old Spot. I don't know, but for me it doesn't really work, and I'm not sure that's going to appease the fans if they're the old fans if they're unhappy with this anyway. Having said all that, I did enjoy this film. It's a simple tale that at times ties itself up in knots, but it is a modern blockbuster that's got probably more brains than the average these days. It's enjoyable, it's a popcorn summer film. It doesn't manage to solve the pre-existing problems that somewhat weigh it down, but it does entertain and it's worth seeing on the big screen. Kind regards, Christopher.